Welcome to week 1 of our Puzzled by the Bible small group study. I couldn't be more excited about the journey that you're about to take together. And what you can expect is that each week we're going to have a brief overview of the message so that we all are on the same page, and then we're going to learn how to apply the message to our everyday lives. The basis of the Christian faith and what we know about God can be found in the Bible. I want to be totally honest and let you know that I don't remember the last time that I've read a 1,200-page book. But I know for sure that individuals had experiences with God that they wrote about in the Bible. And God, through the Holy Spirit, inspired them to write the things that they wrote down so that we might be able to experience God through the Bible as well. So whether you're approaching this series and you're thinking, you know what, I honestly don't know a single thing about the Bible, or if you're approaching it saying, I'm a biblical scholar, the great news is that we're all going to be able to build the same foundation through this teaching of understanding the Bible together. The Bible is an absolutely incredible document. It's composed of 66 books that are broken up into the New Testament and the Old Testament. And as we learned this weekend, testament is another word for contract or covenant. It was written by 44 different authors over a period of over 1,500 years in 3 different languages with people who were just from very different walks of life. We had shepherds and farmers. We had fishermen and tent makers who all had a hand in being a part of writing the Bible. This week, we not only learned facts about the Bible, but we also learned that it's broken into 7 distinct sections. The Bible opens where God creates us to be in relationship with Him, where it's just God and righteous man in paradise. Righteous man that we worked rightly. We worked the way that God created us to, which was in relationship with Him. The problem is that then we see Satan and sin enter into the garden. And for each of us, we still feel the effects of the sin that Adam and Eve originally had in the garden. The reality is that there's a distance between us and God that came in because of that relationship with Satan and sin. After Satan and sin, we see that the world is judged and destroyed, that Noah and his family alone is saved from the judgment of God. And even after all of that, mankind still continues to rebel against God. And once we begin to be established again here on the earth, we decide that we're going to form a one-world government. So God makes it so that that is not possible, but He's not done with us yet. Because the next part of the story is that He chooses 12 tribes. We see God dealing with the 12 tribes of Israel throughout Genesis 12, all the way into Malachi and into the New Testament. Ultimately, the very apex, the very most exciting thing that happens in the Bible is when this man named Jesus comes on the scene. We believe that Jesus was truly God and truly man, that He came down and lived the sinless life that we couldn't live. He died the death that we deserved and was raised again in victory over sin. And because of Him, we can have right relationship with God. From there, we see the New Testament mirror the Old Testament. We have the church that comes onto the scene to mirror Israel. We have the one world government. The world is judged and destroyed, and eventually Satan and sin will exit and we'll be restored to right relationship between us and God. That is the overarching story of the Bible. And this week, we began to read in the Bible the first 3 words written in Genesis. It was this: in the beginning. In the beginning. In the beginning helps us understand that God has no equal. That there is nothing that competes with God. There's nothing more mighty than God. There's nothing more amazing than God. That God has no equal. As I was dwelling on that this week, it came into my mind, man, what are the things in my life that begin to outweigh God? That I think for a second that God does have an equal. That maybe for some of us, we're looking at our life and we're saying, man, it seems like right now I'm so overwhelmed with work. I'm so overwhelmed with my marriage or with my parenting that sometimes I get so caught up in the realities of life that I miss the part where God has no equal. Where in your life this week do you need to realize that God has no equal? Maybe for some of us, we're struggling financially, that we don't know where our next paycheck is going to come from. We're not sure how we're going to pay that next set of bills for our electricity or our water. And we're wondering, I don't even know what to do with my finances. For some of us, it might be relational, that we're looking at our spouse or we're looking at a relationship with somebody that's close to us. And we're, man, it just seems like we don't even know what direction to go in. For some of us, it might be in our spiritual journey, that we're not sure what the next right step is to take in our life. And I want to let you know that in this moment, God has no equal. We read in our YouVersion Bible app this week in our So Be It plan, and we read from Psalm 121. It says this, it says, "Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither sleep nor slumber. The Lord is your keeper." And what we can get from that passage is that there's never a point in time in our life where God just goes away and takes a nap and then comes back and is like, I didn't see that coming in your life. I didn't see that happening in your life financially, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. I didn't see that coming up. There's never a point in which that happens. And so we can sleep peacefully knowing that we have a God who never sleeps nor slumbers, who is our keeper. What is it in your life that you need to be reminded that God has no equal and that he cares so deeply about you, his child, his son, or his daughter? That's the first thing that we learned about. The first thing we learned about is that God has no equal. The second thing we learned about this week is that sin leads to death. And the third one is that we are to blame. The reality is that sometimes in our life, we begin to blame our external circumstances for what's going on in our life, that we begin to blame the people around us or things that are happening and going on around us for why we behave the way that we behave. And before we know it, we're not taking responsibility for our actions. That's what happens in Genesis 3. When Adam and Eve sin, their initial reaction is to blame those around them. Adam looks to Eve and he says, "God, it's because of Eve, the woman that you gave me, that I sinned." And then Eve turns around and she says, "Well, it's because of the serpent that I sinned." And nobody's taking responsibility for their actions. And it's always a temptation in our life to blame external circumstances for why we are the way we are today. For some of us, we're saying, well, you don't understand. It's the way that I grew up in my home. It's the way that my parents raised me. It's their fault. And we go through this reasoning and these excuses that we come up with for why we act the way we do because of the things that our parents did to us. Or maybe we say, well, you don't understand what it was like to grow up like I did and to not have the opportunities that I had in work. And so now we look around us and we blame situations around us for why we're behaving the way we're behaving. My question for you this week would be, what are the things that you need to take responsibility for in your life and stop blaming other people and external circumstances for? Because ultimately, we're to blame. But I want to let you know that God has more for you, that God would love to see you thrive and be in full relationship with him, full relationship with others, and full and true relationship with yourself. Well, each week we're going to be coming up with new questions that we're going to ask that we can apply to our lives from the sermon that we heard the weekend before. Here's what I love about this sermon series. It's that we start to understand how our story and God's story come together to form one cohesive story. Well, we're going to turn it over to the group leaders, and they have a number of different questions that are going to help you apply the truths to your life this week. My encouragement would be to be open, honest, and ready to go forward this week with what God has asked you to walk in obedience to. Would you walk in obedience to him this week?